Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. In this video, I go through October's monthly report for the PU, keeping you all up to date with Star Citizen's development. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members who make these videos possible, in particular to my latest patron, Nils Tuff. Thank you all so much for your support. So kicking off with animation, the team progressed with mission giver posing and completed the facial animations for emotes, bounty hunters, general outlaws and more, and also supported with mocap and continued to work through the backlog of animation tasks. The environment team wrapped up the refinery decks, including finalizing the art and putting the finishing touches to the dressing and world building. The decks have now been handed over to audio, lighting and visual effects teams for their final polish work. It is going to be very exciting getting these in game for the end of the year, especially considering they have actual gameplay functionality, which I do believe we will learn more about in next week's Inside Star Citizen. Anyway, the team also continued adding gas clouds to Lagrange points, with them saying these are really benefiting from the first lighting pass, with some absolutely gorgeous final frames being produced. The team have been working hard with graphics to ensure the clouds remain performant enough for use in the multiplayer environment of the PU. They also began final art on the ship-to-station docking lobby and exterior, and pre-production kicked off for the brand new colonialism ground-based archetypes. That whole sentence is just magnificent. We actually got to see some of these bases or these homesteads in Inside Star Citizen recently, which I'm showing right now. And it does sound as though ship-to-station docking is coming sooner than later, which is equally exciting. So let's hope that comes in a good time frame. Anyway, the LZ team continued with Iridescent, making great progress with the industrial platform. The commercial platform art greybox is almost complete, with some areas being brought up to the final art, which will act as the benchmark for the rest of the location. Hopefully we'll get to see that. The transit badge is nearing completion and has been fully implemented into the level, with several currently moving between platforms. So it looks like Horizon is having a transit badge. Sounds a bit bigger than what we have with ArtCorp and other places, but I'm assuming this is kind of like a flying one rather than on rails. And also, the Horizon spaceport moved into final art. Alongside Horizon, the art prototype for the hacking feature had its first pass and is awaiting implementation and iteration. I'm not sure what they're meaning by hacking feature. They haven't talked about anything they're working on recently that regards hacking, so I'm not sure what that's relating to. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments, but it is great to hear that Horizon is making amazing progress, although we know we won't really be seeing that until next year, unfortunately. Work on the convention space for this year's Intergalactic Aerospace Expo was completed. New informational screens were placed in landing zones to tie into upcoming events, and existing screens were updated to be more dynamic. The organics team finalised art for Pyro's celestial bodies, although another round of polish will be undertaken before release. More work was done on Crusader, alongside tech changes for gas giants, which will also benefit regular planets. I wonder in what way the gas giants will benefit the regular planets. It's going to be nice to see this. I'm actually very excited that they're getting on with this gas giant tech, because that's kind of what's holding up getting a complete Stanton, and it will also benefit pretty much every other system, because I think the majority of them do have gas giants, so it will really play a big part in system building as a whole. Time was also spent prototyping touch blending for foliage and object buoyancy for floating assets on planetary bodies of water. Touch blending is as you move through the plants and bushes and whatnot, they move accordingly. So ship art continued with the Crusader Hercules, further developing the engineering section and bridge, both of which are approaching the end of their final art phase. Exterior-wise, materials were polished and the landing gear is now final art complete. Will we see this in the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo? I really hope so. I do own a Hercules C2, so I'm excited to see that come along. The Iridescent Shader created for the Talon is ready for implementation, as is the Shrike's internal missile system, and the landing gear and damage setup were also finalised. Probably going to see this at the IAE as well. So the team progressed on the Mercury Star Runner, finishing level of details, UI panels, the cargo area and cockpit, and the vehicle tech art team supported on the Mercury's hardpoints, pivots, landing gear, vis areas, and damage states. I wish they would just release it already so we could do that giveaway. On that note, do make sure you are subscribed if you want to be in with a chance to win the Mercury Star Runner. We will be giving it away as soon as it becomes available to buy. So on to character combat AI. The first pass on surrender behavior was completed. This allows NPCs who are under pressure and without ammunition to decide to surrender. NPCs will try to find lootable ammo boxes or request help from friendlies and loot available weapons, but if no options are available, they will try to survive by staying out of dangerous environments, so it'll be great chasing them down and playing hide and seek. The team also began implementing support for character traits, which exposes the ability of selected traits in a character skills and traits editor. This means designers can then assign traits to templates that are then assigned to the character, which can be used to either modify or enable specific behaviors in the characters. So for example, an NPC who is a coward won't try to put pressure on the player, they will probably just hide and hang back. Finally, several bugs were fixed for visual perception, cover usage, and the Vanduul dodge reactions. Onto general AI, the team found and fixed several issues related to characters standing on top of usables, so standing on top of chairs. Code was actually added to handle this particular edge case, and they have updated some of the recent AI components to avoid this in the future. Fingers crossed they have completely removed the standing on chair issue. For the ship AI team, they began by expanding the quantum travel subsumption task. This will be used where a behavior needs to queue quantum travel for a ship and then continue with regular duties, which is particularly useful in multi-crew ships. They have continued iterating on missile targeting, ensuring all turrets respond immediately to incoming hostile torpedoes when not in combat mode. Plus, they have adjusted targeting priorities to give a better balance when capital ships are fighting multiple targets, which will also improve how seat operators handle burst fire when controlling ship weapons. They've worked on accuracy calculations to simulate NPCs trying to hit a target faster when they are missing, but then relaxing slightly when on target. I believe this is AI convergence, which is also coming in 3.12. And then finally, for ship AI, the capital ship combat was improved to allow ranged combat, and NPCs now react to an enemy weapon starting to charge, plus several bugs were fixed and improvements were made to the breakaway movement request, the patrol around position assignment, and the hostility of specific targets. So finally for AI, the social AI team moved the first version of the mess hall scenario into a state that allows other teams to better iterate on animations, props, and the technical setup. At the moment, the scenario supports usables that provide cutlery, food, and drink. NPCs can go to the food line, retrieve anything their sustenance behavior wants, which is basically, do they need water, do they need food, and then take that food to the table and consume it. Consuming this food will actually impact the NPC's status system as well, which is pretty deep when you consider that even our crew members will need to eat and drink. The team also worked on specific behaviours that will benefit both the PU and Squadron, including arcade machines and dancing, so being able to play arcade machines will be one of the available leisure activities, while dancing will likely be a specific activity for patrons of discos or bars and other appropriate areas. So onto the weapon art. The team completed the first pass of the medical gun. Level of detail 0 art for an upcoming Bearing LMG and a new Gemini sniper rifle was done as well. So the LMG is the FS9, I think it is, and the Gemini is the AO3. The latest Bearing size 10 turret was finalised, and the team are nearing the end of their pass on weapon reticles, which will add zeroing and range finding along with various art tweaks. It's going to be really interesting seeing weapon zeroing, especially how each scope or sight will handle it differently. So excited to see that one. Finally, art for the multi-tool tractor beam attachment was completed, as was a new set of Klaus and Werner holographic sights. Last month, the audio team was focused on the Star Runner, and they said such a large ship with so many moving parts requires all of our sound designers working on it at once. It sounds interesting. For backend services, they spent time identifying and addressing issues in the recent patch release, including correcting primary hub crashes. Some low-level backend networking code was cleaned up, which improved stability and will contribute to having more concurrent players online, so that is definitely important work. And finally, for backend services, they fixed bugs in various loadouts, inventory, and the Mobi-Glass. So the character team begun the month with AI working on creatures. Very excited to see them. This involved creating quick blockouts to check scale, assess model issues, test rigs, and iterate on ideas. It is going to be very cool to see the Pyro Crab, the Kazi Grazer Cow, and the Microtech Bearing game In fact, I think we got a glimpse of one of these models to check scale of the Pyro Crab in the latest Inside Star Citizen. If you notice it kind of in the background of these habitation areas, it's going to be quite a formidable beast, I expect. They've also worked on 2 new armor sets targeted for 2021 and subflare planned for 311.1, which I think is the Nerf gun, and for 3.12. They've also done concepts for 3 full sets of armor that will support mining and bounty hunting gameplay. They're currently concepting paired backpacks for all of these sets in support of the external inventory. Now, we got to see this and it looks really cool, especially the helmet. I wonder if we'll be able to have these moving visors where you can have your visor up or down at one point. But I'm really liking the look of these new armor sets and the backpacks, of course. In my opinion, the more the merrier. Anyway, on to engineering. Now, the physics team worked on the volumetric soft body prototype and volumetric deformation rendering and improved the threading of various subsystems and added faster spatial grid queries, which as a result means less delay and more optimization for creating the world around you. Vital improvements were made to collision detection, solving a long-standing issue, and they have also begun researching improvements to the setup of vegetation touch blending. There's been lots of ongoing work on the Gen 12 renderer transition and refactoring, and progress on atmospheres, clouds and unified ray marching was merged into the main dev stream, so we should see the benefits of them in an upcoming release. They have also implemented a dynamic culling path in the zone system. Basically, this type of culling can be used for a number of things, like dynamically reducing the number of particles in big battles to keep performance up, to removing quality from less important objects when hundreds of players are all on the screen at one time, and so on. The radix tree culling logic was tweaked, with the threading logic adjusted to reduce contention. This culling system is not something that is easily explained, unfortunately, but it's mostly to do with multi-threading optimizations per frame draw. And finally, the crash handler was refined, which gives the devs a very detailed view of where something went wrong without the need to totally recreate the player environment. So a big thank you to my friend as well for breaking that down for me. He did write a lot more, but it was still too complicated for my brain to take in. But that is the basic gist of the engineering section. Anyway, on to gameplay features. They worked on the reputation system, which will receive continuous polish as it gets closer to release, which will allow it to be rolled out in a limited capacity as current gameplay is converted to take advantage of the new functionality. Now, this is very interesting. I do wonder if we will see this come in 3.12 or whether they're thinking more next year, but this could apply to hauling guilds, mining guilds maybe with the new refinery decks, or even bounty hunting. All this reputation is just doing jobs for a certain company or person in the game and getting a reputation with them, be that positive or negative. So let's hope we get that sooner rather than later. Now, they also continued to work on 2 new core Mobiglass apps, one being the Asset Manager, which carries on from the trading app and will be critical to the localized inventory, which is planned for release next year. This will basically allow us to trade items with each other instead of sending money. Like, for example, I will give you 4 med pens for your C54 magazine or a bottle of water and so on. It'll handle the basics of legal and physical ownership, I think. And the second app is the Mission Manager app, which will tie into the new dynamic mission system currently being worked on. Very happy to hear that this is being worked on. No idea when we will actually see any of this in game, but when it does come, it'll make a huge difference to missions. I'm not sure if they're planning this for late next year with the quantum system, or whether they can introduce the dynamic missions earlier. Let's hope so. Finally, the team began working on a new feature that will change the way that players restock their ships at rest stops. Basically, all missiles, flares and chaffs will be replaced via a proper shopping flow, which allows for the team to separate the pricing for each item. Ultimately, this will result in higher prices for restocking, although insurance prices and timers will be adjusted accordingly. So there's quite a lot to take in with that paragraph. Firstly, actual shopping for these countermeasures and missiles may mean way more options and different types of countermeasures potentially, but it will also mean that we will need to think more about being conservative with our items as they carry a bigger cost. But it'll also be interesting to see how this affects the insurance timers and prices, but it sounds like a step in the right direction. Anyway, the vehicle features team spent time developing tech to help share the IFCS code, which is the Intelligent Flight Control System, kind of like an automated way of making sure all thrusters are firing in the direction that they need to be when you put in an input. But they're saying with other movement-heavy systems, for example, zero-gravity EVA movement, this will eventually use the same code and allow the team to utilize a wealth of AI logic and navigation code first written for ships. This code will also be used for missiles as well, further unifying and simplifying the types of code that deal with movement in space. So it sounds like a pretty logical step in the right direction, so let's hope we get some good benefits for when that's converted. Now, work went towards displaying ship names and serial numbers on the sides of ships, with the team saying most of the underlying tech has been completed. We're now connecting things up and making the whole thing work. We also found a way to assign a serial number to ships that weren't given at the time of purchase. Now, this sounds really great. Finally, we're going to be able to name our ships and have those names displayed on the ships will be incredible. This is one step closer to feeling like the ships that we buy or that we own are more personal and actually unique to us. So I'm really excited to see that. Hopefully it comes this year, but it could be more into next. Finally, the team continued with the Merlin and Constellation docking work. They did the UI to aid in docking, which was completed, and various issues to persistence were also resolved, enabling the two ships to spawn as a pair. They say the team are now working through the minor tasks in a push to call this feature finished, with the word finished being in quotation marks. So maybe they're not saying release finished, but more internally complete. But either way, it doesn't look like the Constellation owners will be waiting much longer to finally be able to detach their snubcraft. So the graphics team delivered the Iridescent Shader, which simulates color shift based on the camera angle relative to the surface, and the light beam shader underwent significant quality improvements and bug fixes. This helps to simulate distant light beams beyond the range that can be simulated by the volumetric fog system, and work continued on the Gen 12 renderer and the automated testing system. So the lighting team was focused on the Microtech Intergalactic Aerospace Expo venue. They also continued with R&D for the upcoming implementation of gas clouds. They said lighting will play a major part in the mood portrayed by these gas clouds, and the current goal is to achieve a visual style that conveys whether the clouds are dangerous or safe, while fitting in with the overall style of the Stanton system. Also, the lighting team are now underway with the refinery decks, which need to look highly utilitarian and functional. The narrative team worked on the upcoming releases like the refinery decks, Iridescent and more, and several scripts for new mission content were written. Very excited to see new missions coming along. The props team continued to support the trolley push and pull system and the bartender, plus they completed a few new props for Iridescent and the modular refinery locations. Work was also completed on the new freestanding elevator panel assets. The tech animation team began overhauling combat animations to remove technical glitches in AI weapon holding. The UI team further iterated on the 3D lighting system to improve the appearance of ships and the items on UI screens with holograms. And finally, the visual effects team worked on several ships last month, including the Star Runner, and they also continued to iterate on ship weapon effects with particular attention paid to readability at distance. They did the same for missiles, allowing the trails to appear for longer, and continued with signed distance field shield impact effects. Very much looking forward to seeing how these new shields will look as they take impacts from all types of weapon damage, be that distortion, energy or ballistics. Anyway, that was the monthly report. Quite a lot of information there, some very exciting stuff in the works. Whether we see some of that come for 3.12 or if it's more slated for next year, we will have to wait and see, but there is some good stuff coming and I'm very excited for it. With that said, do make sure to hit subscribe if you want to be in with a chance to win an MSR. We will be giving that away, as I say, once it becomes available. Also, tick that notification bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live. And hit the like button if you don't mind, it really does the channel a big favour. And come and hang out over on twitch.tv/supermacbrothers. Everybody is welcome. Thank you again to my patrons and channel members who make these videos possible. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.